They say money can't buy freedom, but Shihyun was about to learn that freedom might have a price tag after all. $500,000 to be exact. And the only person who could help her was the same man she spent 10 years trying to escape. Funny how life works sometimes. Most women would rather set themselves on fire than go crawling back to their ex-husband. Shihyun used to think she was one of them. She spent a decade being the perfect porcelain doll in her marriage, wearing the clothes he chose, walking in shoes he picked out, living life according to his careful orchestration. Every morning, she'd wake up next to a stranger who treated her more like a possession than a wife. The day she finally broke free, she swore she'd never look back. But here she was, riding the elevator to the top floor of his company building, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. The receptionist had greeted her as Mrs. Lee. Apparently, their divorce was as invisible as she felt in their marriage. After her father died of cancer, something in Shihyun died too. Her ability to stay silent, to play the role of the obedient wife. She begged for a divorce, offering to walk away with nothing, but he refused, so she'd simply walked away anyway. She never thought she'd be the one coming back. But then again, she never thought her brother, Jihyun, would be stupid enough to borrow $500,000 from loan sharks, using their family home as collateral. The memory of her mother's tears still burned fresh in her mind. Her proud mother, reduced to sobbing on the floor, surrounded by loan documents that might have as well been death sentences. Shihyun had spent the entire previous day sitting on a park bench, running through her options until her head hurt. No bank would loan her that kind of money. Her friends couldn't help. Her relatives were out of the question. There was only one person in her world who could casually write a check for $500,000, and she'd spent 10 years trying to forget he existed. The elevator dinged, announcing her arrival at the top floor. Shihyun smoothed down her dress, a habit from her days as Mrs. Lee, and stepped out. Her ex-husband's assistant smiled warmly, and for a moment, Shihyun felt like she'd stepped back into time. When the door finally slid open, she saw him, Lee Jae-won. The man she'd spent 3 years trying to forget sat at his desk like a king on his throne, backlit by floor-to-ceiling windows that made Seoul look like his personal kingdom. He didn't even look up. Sit. One word, cold as winter, just like old times. She recognized this game, this silent power play. Jae-won, She tried for apologetic, something about being sorry for disappearing, only to show up asking for favors. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. Spare me, he cut her off, finally looking up. His eyes were sharp enough to draw blood. I don't care for apologies. Let's discuss your price instead. Her stomach dropped, of course. He'd always been a businessman first. Everything was a transaction to him. He rose from his desk with predatory grace. 1 year, he said, watching her face. 1 year where you belong to me again. Complete obedience, no questions asked. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. That's my price for $500,000. The air left her lungs. She expected him to demand something awful. But this was worse. He wanted to cage her again, clip her wings, turn her back into his perfect, silent doll. She stood up so quickly, her chair almost toppled. I'm sorry for wasting your time, she managed, turning away to the elevator. Her hands were shaking. Really? His voice followed her. And what's your plan B, Shihyun? Have you calculated the interest rates loan sharks charge these days? Each word was carefully chosen, precisely aimed. Do you think I don't know exactly who your brother borrowed from? She froze, hand halfway to the elevator button. The door slid open with a cheerful ding that felt like mockery. Jae-won's reflection appeared behind her in the polished metal doors, tall and imposing. Last chance, he said softly. Take the elevator and walk away, or stay and I'll transfer the money immediately. Shihyun stared at the empty elevator, her escape route. But it wasn't really an escape, was it? There was no way out of this trap. There never had been. The choice had been an illusion from the start. She watched the doors slide closed, taking her freedom with them. Jaewon's hands settled on her shoulders, heavy as chains. "Smart girl," he murmured, and she could hear the victory in his voice. True to his word, he made the transfer first. She watched the numbers appear in her phone screen, more money than she'd ever seen. Then his hands were on her again. Sunlight crept through the office windows, finding Shihyun alone with her thoughts and the ghost of last night's decisions. Jaewon was nowhere to be seen, but his presence lingered like perfume in an empty room. She almost laughed at the absurdity of all of it. How many times had she sworn she'd never see him again? Yet, here she was, wearing nothing but regrets and morning lights. A neatly folded pair of socks on the desk caught her eyes. Of course he thought of that. Jaewon had always been meticulous, planning 10 steps ahead while everyone else was still figuring out the first move. Even now, he was choreographing her life down to the socks on her feet. "Take your time." His voice behind her sent her scrambling for cover. "Get out!" she yelped, clutching her clothes like armor. "In my own office?" Amusement colored his tones. "No one else will come in, Shihyun." "I meant you." But even as she said it, he was moving closer. And damn him. Damn her body for remembering him. Under that trademark ice-cold expression, something burned hot enough to melt her resistance. One look from him, and her knees threatened to buckle. Their lips met again before she could stop it. This time, when she whispered, "Stop," he actually listened, though the victory felt hollow. "Get dressed," he ordered, straightening his already perfect tie. "Meet me downstairs. You're coming home with me." "Wait, the money first. The loan sharks." Already handled, his casual tone made 6 figures sound like pocket change. Though you were off on the amount, it was $650, not $500. The wall caught her before her legs gave out. An extra $150,000? The depth around her neck had just gotten heavier, and Jaewon's eyes hadn't gotten any warmer. 15 minutes, he said, leaving her with her weak knees and a head full of questions. Don't be late. Later in his luxury car that probably cost more than her family's house, he handed her a contract, thick enough to be a novel. She stared at the dense legal text until the words swarmed before her eyes. There it was, in black and white. 1 year of her life, signed away like a business deal. Her hand only shook a little as she signed. In the end, she had no one to blame but herself. The contract was just a formality. She'd already sealed her fate the moment she walked into the office. So here's the thing about cooking breakfast for your ex-husband turned loan shark. It's weird. Like, seriously weird. But that's exactly what Shihyun's doing right now. Standing in Jaewon's fancy kitchen while sunlight streams through windows that probably cost more than her old apartment. She has barely gotten eggs going when she feels him behind her. And yeah, okay, maybe her body betrays her a little, or a lot, when his hands find their way to her waist. She gets breakfast on the table eventually, though her pride takes a hit when she has to suggest the shower and he just brushes it off with the ice prince attitude of his. Classic Jaewon move, really. Always knows how to kill the mood. She sits there, picking at her food, mind going 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's driving her crazy, trying to figure out his game. He could literally have anyone doing his domestic goddess routine for him. So why her? The guy never even liked her to begin with. God, she remembers their first meeting like it was yesterday. He'd been this perfect package. Successful, gorgeous, the whole 9 yards. Even with the arranged marriage thing hanging over them, she'd been kind of excited. But then came the disaster of the first date, where he basically turned into a mute who couldn't make eye contact. Talk about a letdown. Hey, I need to run home today, she says, breaking the silence. Bad move. Jaewon's head snaps up. Why? The money's handled. Just some clothes and some stuff. Order new ones. She actually laughs at that. Yeah. No, I'm not using your money. That's rich, he scoffs, coming from someone who just borrowed 600 grand. Things spiral pretty quickly after that. She's yelling about not being his doll to lock up, he's moving towards her, and suddenly there's water everywhere because apparently expensive glasses shatter just like cheap ones. Then he drops the bomb. If she leaves, the contract's void. She's backing away, sputtering about how that wasn't in the paperwork, but he just hits her with his smug, lenders make the rule line that makes her want to scream. He's all business now, laying down the law. Someone's coming with clothes she has to wear. They're meeting somewhere tonight. And oh yeah, don't worry about the mess because the help will clean it up. But it is his parting shot that really twists the knife. Am I any worse than your brother's loan sharks? She doesn't even bother responding. What's the point? The guy hates her guts. And honestly, the feeling's mutual. Or at least, that's what she keeps telling herself. The clothes arrive in boxes that probably cost more than her monthly rent used to. Shihyun stands there, running her hands over fabric that felt like it's worth someone's collared tuition. She picks up a dress that screams, trophy wife. No price tag needed to know it costs a fortune. The shoes, the makeup, everything's laid out like she's some life-sized Barbie waiting to be dressed up. You've never been a doll to me, Jaewon's words from earlier echoed in her head like a bad joke. Yeah, right. Tell that to this collection of designer everything that's practically shouting, dress up time! She catches herself wondering if he even remembers what she likes to wear. Stop it, she mutters, shaking her head. Love was never part of the deal. Their marriage had been a business arrangement from day one. Why should this weird Loan Shark sequel be any different? Her feet carried her to their old bedroom before her brain can stop them. The bed's still there, looking exactly the same, and suddenly, memories are hitting like a tidal wave. Nights of silence, mornings of emptiness. Mechanically, she puts on the outfit, the whole 9 yards, makeup and all. The woman staring back from the mirror looks expensive, polished, perfect, and completely dead inside. She might as well be one of those mannequins in the department store windows, posed and pretty and hollow. Nope, not doing this. The dress hits the floor with a soft whisper of fabric. The makeup gets wiped off, and Shihyun? She got other plans. Meanwhile, at some fancy restaurant, Jaewon's doing his best not to look like he's waiting for someone. The hostess keeps trying to seat him, but he waves her off with that CEO authority he's perfected. 2 years. It's been 2 years since the divorce, and here he is, setting up dinner dates like some lovesick teenager. He can't even blame it on wanting to talk things out, because, let's be real, talking is the last thing they would have been doing since she moved back. Every time he gets within arm's reach of her, his brain short-circuits and, well, breakfast was a pretty good example of how things usually ends up. And then she walks in. Jaewon's brain takes a second to process what he's seeing. She's wearing the same ordinary clothes from earlier, the ones she wore to his office. Not a stitch of the designer outfit he sent, not a trace of makeup. Her hair's pulled back in a simple ponytail, and the look in her eyes? Pure defiance. She marches right up to him, plants herself square in his personal space, and meets his gaze head-on. The air between them crackles with tension, like the moment before a lightning strike. Game on. Jaewon's irritation radiates off him in waves as he takes in her everyday outfit. The look he gives her practically screams that she's testing his patience, but Shihyun just shrugs it off. Those fancy clothes he sent? Way too much. He points out that they're exactly what she used to wear as his wife. Something inside her snaps. Yeah, she wore them back then and hated every second of it. Funny how divorce can give you the backbone you never knew you needed. He lets out this frustrated sigh that probably cost him thousands in CEO coaching sessions, muttering something about her newfound stubbornness. When he turns to enter the restaurant, he realizes she hasn't moved an inch. The surprise on his face almost makes her laugh. Almost. Inside, while he was busy arranging their table, Shihyun's mind is racing. She hadn't expected him to be so calm about her little rebellion. Then again, nothing in the contract said anything about him controlling her wardrobe. They're not even really together. This is just business, right? The restaurant's doing some weeknight wine promotion, and before she knows it, there's fancy red stuff in her glass. Jaewon's ordering something complicated, probably expensive, but Shihyun's too busy watching him to actually listen. The way his lips move when he talks to the waitress, how his fingers tap against the menu. It's weirdly fascinating, until he catches her staring and makes some comments about her not drinking alcohol. The wine situation turns into this whole thing, with him completely ignoring her attempts to explain that yes, actually she does drink now. He just goes ahead and orders a bottle anyway, because of course he does. Classic Jaewon move. They eat in this thick silence that feels like it's going to suffocate them both. When Shihyun finally breaks it, she calls him out on his earlier comment about her stubbornness. She's still the same person, she tells him. She's just done being invisible. His confusion about when he ever ignored her opinions nearly makes her lose it. He cuts her incoming rant with some vague nonsense about having good reasons for keeping her from going home, but won't elaborate. Instead, he turns around on her, pointing out how he bought her new clothes since she couldn't go home. Who's being unreasonable now? The words sting more than they should. Her hands tighten around the table knife as memories flood back. This is exactly how he has always been. But according to him, he never spoke back then. The wine suddenly looks really appealing. His voice gets softer as he tries to explain. Work kept him busy during the day. And at night? Well, her cheeks heat up at the memory. But his words feel hollow after years of cold silence. She must be starting again because suddenly he's concerned about whether she's eaten enough, commenting how thin she's gotten. His casual mention of their intimacy makes her face burn, and she has to look away as the waitress tops up their wine. More wine disappears as Shihyun calls him out on his unchanged insensitivity, the alcohol hitting her now, making everything fuzzy and around the edges, but she pushes through. She tells him how the divorce helped her find herself, how despite the struggles, she finally felt free. Her brother's mess is the only reason she's back here, and the admission makes her want to cry. Jaewon quietly dismisses the hovering waitress, cutting off their wine supply. But it's too late. The truth's already spilling out. Through the wine-induced haze, Shihyun feels victorious, like she's finally landed a blow on that perfect face of his. The concern in his eyes only make it worse. The big question tumbles out. Why her? Why pick his boring ex-wife when he could have anyone? His response is another question. Has she been with anyone else since leaving? Her negative answer brings out a confession. He hasn't either. No other women, no dates, nothing. Just memories of her. His explanation is simple, devastating in its honesty. Just seeing her makes him want her. The implications hang in the air. She's the only one he's ever wanted. Sure enough, he mentions getting a room upstairs. His extended hand is an invitation to something new, something different. Maybe it's the wine, maybe it's hope, but after a moment's hesitation, Shihyun takes it. Something in his eyes tells her that maybe, just maybe, he really has changed. Night fades into morning, and Jaewon finds himself watching Shihyun's peaceful sleep. Her words from dinner echoing in his mind. Self-centered, she'd called him. All those years together, and he never bothered to understand what she was thinking or feeling. The realization settles heavy in his chest. He wants to be better this time around. Dawn brings business though, and with it, a troubling phone call. Jaewon's voice is low as he discusses the latest developments with his contact. $700 million. That's what Joo-won tried to borrow in his sister's name, with Jaewon listed as the guarantor. The audacity of all this makes his jaw clench. His contact confirms they've contained the situation, with Joo-won currently cooling his heels at the warehouse. Jaewon approves of this course of action, planning to deal with his former brother-in-law personally in the coming days. He's so absorbed in the call that he doesn't notice Shihyun staring. When she approaches with questions about the conversation, he deflects, pulling into an embrace instead. Memory takes him back through his history with Joo-won, a string of incidents preceding even his marriage to Shihyun, each one swept under the rug for her sake. The divorce request brings particularly bitter memories. Joo-won on his knees, begging Jaewon not to go through with it. Back then, he thought it was for family loyalty. Now, he sees what it was for. Panic over losing access to Jaewon's wealth. The thought that Joo-won would continue these schemes, knowing full well how his sister suffers for his actions, makes Jaewon's blood boil. A lesson needs to be taught for Shihyun's sake, if for nothing else. His grip tightens unconsciously as Shihyun complains about not being able to breathe. The moments shift, tension melting into something lighter as she mentions feeling strange pressed against him. Their playful negotiation over time reductions from their contract reveals how far they've come. She's comfortable enough now to bargain with him, to push back. Jaewon can't help but smile. 1 week down and she's still here, even if it's just because of the money. He counters her request for 4 weeks with an offer of 3, ever the businessman. He knows if not for the money, Shihyun would have left without sparing him a second glance. Jaewon plans to fix their marriage before his time runs out, but in the meantime, he sits back to watch his ex-wife try to seduce him. The morning light filters through the curtains as Shihyun mentally tallies her victories. 1 passionate encounter equals 1 month of her contract. Not a bad exchange rate, really. But there's this nagging thought that won't leave her alone. Those 3 little words that slipped out somewhere between kisses. Love. She'd actually said it, hadn't she? Heat rushes to her face as she tries to rationalize it away. Just the heat of the moment, she tells herself. Just trying to save face during an embarrassing situation. But then, Jaewon's arms slide around her, and suddenly, all those carefully constructed explanations dissolve like sugar in hot tea. His voice is barely above a whisper, as he admits his past uncertainties. Back then, he could never read her reactions when he held her like this. Love? Hate? The mystery of her feelings had haunted him, and he defaulted to assuming the worst. After all, who could blame her? Their marriage had been a business transaction, signed and sealed by their fathers. The truth spilled out of him like water from a cracked dam. He thought being a good provider was enough. The clothes, the shoes, the lifestyle. Material things were easy, quantifiable. Emotions? Those were a terrain he hadn't known how to navigate. Shihyun feels something shift in her chest. Maybe they share some blame here. She admits her own part in their communication breakdown. How intimidating he'd been. How impossible it had felt to bridge the gap between them. But now, the words came easier, flow more naturally. His smile at this confession made her heart do something complicated in her chest. The bed felt like a sanctuary, a soft island where truth can finally surface. But reality beckons, and Shihyun moves to leave their warm cocoon. His voice stops her, soft but urgent. 3 simple words that carry the weight of their entire history. Can we start over? Starting over with your ex-husband isn't exactly the kind of thing they write self-help books about. The suggestion hit Shihyun like a curveball, and her first thought was marriage. Because, of course it is. But Jaewon's got other plans. He's thinking long-term, suggesting they stick to their original contract for now. A year, he says. A year to prove he's worth a second shot. The whole thing leaves Shihyun feeling like she's trying to stand on quicksand. Real feelings in a year? That's a tall order. Her uncertainty comes out shaky and uncertain. But Jaewon's response is surprisingly gentle. No pressure for an answer. He says, just a chance. That's all he's asking for. And hey, he'll even respect her choices from now on. Her skeptical question about respecting her choices when it came to intimate moments gets answered not with words, but with a kiss that makes her forget why she was skeptical in the first place. When he finally pulls back, there is this smugness about him. He'll just have to make her want him, he says, like he just did. The cockiness in his voice makes her laugh. He has already forgotten about losing their recent bet. Something about his persistence, his newfound playfulness, makes her want to try. No promises, she tells him, but she's willing to see where this goes. The moment gets interrupted by room service knocking, sending her into a scrambled search for her robe while Jaewon calmly helps her get decent. He's already planning their date for later, and it's so unlike the Jaewon she used to know that it feels almost surreal. In the car, reality tries to creep back in when she suddenly remembers work. Until Jaewon reminds her it's Saturday. The realization hits her hard, bringing back memories of their marriage, when time seemed to stand still for her while the world moved on. Now, everything feels like a dream, and she can't tell what's changed. Her, the situation, or Jaewon himself? He breaks through her thoughts with casual chat about traffic, which leads him to announcing their shopping mall destination. His mission? New clothes for her. Her stubbornness about keeping her current clothes leads to some back and forth until he comes up with this clever little scheme. She'll pick out clothes for him first, earning her own new wardrobe in return. It's transparent manipulation, but somehow sweeter than his old ways. A quick peck on the cheek in the middle of traffic proves that this new Jaewon is full of surprises. Her scolding about safety during traffic jam only makes him grin, until the cars actually start moving and catch him off guard. As they drive on, Shihyun's mind circles back to the same question. What's really changed here? She might not have the answer, but for the first time in forever, she feels genuinely happy, even if nothing is going according to plan. Maybe that's the biggest change of all. Nervousness hits Shihyun the moment she steps into the mall. Picking out men's clothes? That's definitely not in her wheelhouse. She leans in to whisper a warning to Jaewon about keeping his expectations low, but he just flashes that infuriating smile and says he expects great things. No pressure or anything. The first price tag she spots nearly gives her a whiplash. One shirt costs what her family spends on food in a month. While she's having a mini crisis over clothing costs, Jaewon's smoothly dismissing the hovering sales assistant, giving Shihyun space to browse. She tries to get some guidance from him about what he likes, but his anything comfortable response is about as helpful as a chocolate teapot. Budget concerns? He waves those away too. Meanwhile, he's over there picking out clothes for her like he's been doing it his whole life. The unfairness of it all makes her want to scream a little. She knows he's always impeccably dressed, even at home, which only adds to the pressure. But then she looks at him, really looks, and something clicks. Dark colors suit him better than light ones. Just like that, she's made her first selection. His enthusiastic response to her choice gets under her skin at first. Surely he's just being nice. But then he actually explains why he likes it, pointing out specific details about the color and style that show he actually means it. The genuine praise makes her cheeks heat up. The whole experience turns out surprisingly fun. Nothing like the nerve-wracking ordeal she imagined. Though it does feel surreal, shopping with her ex-husband like they're on some kind of first date do-over, the universe has a weird sense of humor sometimes. Things take an awkward turn in the dressing room when her hair gets caught in a zipper. Of course the attendant's nowhere to be found, and of course Jaewon throws up to help. His presence in the small space makes her pulse jump, and poorly worded comments about ripping leads to some suggestive banter that has her wanting to melt into the floor. But then, there's this moment, watching him in the mirror as he carefully untangles her hair. This giant of a man, totally focused on such a delicate task. She catches herself admiring him and has to give herself a mental shake, just in time for him to finish his rescue mission. He surprises her with an extra bag when she's done trying things on. Inside is corporate wear, but not the stuffy kind. Comfortable clothes paired with practical shoes. He's actually paid attention to her preferences. The sales assistant gushing about what a sweet husband he is making things awkward. But Jaewon smoothly pivots, explaining they're just dating, and that he's trying his best to impress her. Walking out, Shihyun finds herself staring at his hand. Without overthinking it, she reaches out and takes it, giving it a small squeeze. The gesture feels both new and familiar, like their whole situation. A marriage that ended, now possibly beginning again, but different this time. Better, maybe. Sometimes, the longest way around turns out to be the shortest way home. The perfect shopping date shatters with one text message. Shihyun watches Jaewon's face transform as he reads his secretary's message. Warmth draining away, replaced by something cold and hard. When she asks what's wrong, his dismissal about work business comes out clipped and formal, though he still offers to drive her home. He's suddenly all efficiency, loading shopping bags into the car, not even seeming to notice how his voice had turned into ice. Shihyun chalks it up to work stress, offering to take herself home if he got urgent business. The smile he gives her doesn't quite reach his eyes, even as his finger traces her cheek with familiar tenderness. He insists on driving her, claiming whatever's waiting can wait that long. But Shihyun knows better. Something's definitely up, and that something probably involves her brother. Night falls and the scene shifts to a warehouse where 5 men in expensive suits surround a kneeling figure. Jaewon's arrival sends hope flooding through Joo-won's face. He scrambles to his feet, only to be blocked by the suited men. The cocky indignation in his voice when he demands to know why they're treating him this way shows he hasn't figured out who's actually pulling the strings. Jaewon's cold stare meets Joo-won's desperate eyes. When he signals the men to release Joo-won, the younger man launches into his pitch. Promises of repayment, dreams of success, visions of swimming in money. His voice carries that particular strain of desperation that comes from someone who's never faced real consequences. But Jaewon wasn't interested in Joo-won's schemes. His question about Shihyun cuts through the sales pitch like a knife through butter. Does her own brother ever wonder how she's doing? Joo-won's casual response drips with indifference. Shihyun's fine, he says. She always is. She's got a job in the countryside. He's checked, he claims. Like that makes him the brother of the year. She's with Jaewon now, so obviously everything's perfect. Something dark flashes across Jaewon's face. The memory of Shihyun breaking down at dinner rises unbidden. All that stress, all that pain, and here's the cause of it, not even pretending to care. His teeth grind together as the realization sets in. Some trash can't be recycled. A clipboard appears in Jaewon's hands. When Joo-won asks about its contents, Jaewon just throws his words back at him about repayment. Fear crawls across Joo-won's face as the clipboard lands in front of him. A contract, Jaewon explains with arctic coldness, because lenders got to decide who pays their debts. And he's decided Shihyun won't be the one paying, not when the original borrower is perfectly capable of handling his own mess. Joo-won's bravado crumbles when Jaewon's men pin him down. Their boss outlines his future with clinical precision. A job of Jaewon's choosing, 15 years of payment. When Joo-won tries to use Shihyun as leverage, threatening her reaction to all of this, Jaewon doesn't even blink. Instead, he mentions waiving the interest for old time's sake, though they both knew exactly how much that interest would have been. The unspoken threat of alternative solutions hangs in the air like smoke. The fight drains from Joo-won like water from a broken glass. Jaewon's parting instructions to his men are clear. Watch him, isolate him, handle him. Hours later, the scene can't be more different. Jaewon sits at his desk at home, documents spread before him like fallen leaves. When a glass of water appears at his elbow, he looks up to find Shihyun standing there. Their eyes meet in a moment of silent communication. The confession spills from him first. He's noticed her cleaning, cooking, taking care of everything like it's her duty. That's not why he brought her here, he insists. But Shihyun, ever the workaholic, fidgets with nervous energy as she defends her actions. Her worried questions about her cooking skills after so long make something soften in his expression. His initial description of her food as fine sends her into a spiral of self-doubt, forcing him to backtrack. The way he stumbles over calling her cooking delicious, face flushed with embarrassment, breaks the tension. Her laughter filled the room, and Jaewon finds himself transfixed. Is this a new expression? One he's never seen before? Making him realize just how many sides of her he missed during their marriage. When she tries to leave, claiming she's wasting his time, his hand catches hers. The pull into an embrace is inevitable, natural as gravity. Holding her now, the question echoes in his mind like a haunting melody. Why didn't he do more of this 2 years ago? Why didn't he see what was right in front of him? The same hands that had orchestrated terror in a warehouse hours ago now held with infinite gentleness, as if trying to make up for all the embraces they'd missed before. So yeah, when you're holding hands late at night, one thing tends to lead to another. No surprise there. After they're tangled up in bed, Shihyun using Jaewon's chest as her personal pillow. Usually she gets sleepy after the intimate moments, but tonight it's different. There's just something about feeling totally safe in his arms that's making her eyes heavy. She manages to ask about the work he mentioned earlier, but he just waves it off again. Then he casually drops this bomb. She can visit home tomorrow. Shihyun suddenly wide awake. wondering if she's heard right. Next day, she's at her old place, digging through her stuff. It's weird how less than 2 weeks can feel like a lifetime. Her mom catches her off guard, asking about this supposed countryside job, and the guilt hits Shihyun like a truck. She tries deflecting, telling her mom to worry about Ji-won instead. Apparently, her brother's got a job now, staying at some hostel, supposedly turning his life around. Shihyun's got doubts for days about that one, but she keeps them to herself. No need to rain on her mom's parade. Fast forward 2 months and wow, what a difference. Here's Shihyun in Jaewon's kitchen. Scratch that. Their kitchen now. Taste testing dinner and actually feeling at home. Remember when she thought this would be her personal hell? Yeah, funny how things change. The doorbell rings right on cue because these days, Jaewon can't wait to get home. She stopped trying to put a label on whatever this is between them. Since that night at the restaurant, everything just clicked. He practically sprints home from work now, and they've got their little routines down pat. He hugs her at the door, doing that thing where he pretends to smell dinner, but then actually he's smelling her. Cheesy? Totally. Does it make her blush? Also, totally. They've got this whole evening routine now, dinner and makeout sessions. After dinner, this man who probably couldn't boil water without burning it insists on preparing fruits. She's skeptical, but then he starts giving her this whole TED talk about apple skin nutrition while making this adorably wonky apple bunny, and her heart just melts. Instead of eating his creation, she playfully bites his hand. Yeah, she surprised herself with that one too. He looks so confused she can't help but laugh and lean against him. When she suggests a walk, she immediately backtracks, worried he's tired from work. But he's already shoving that apple bunny in her mouth and reaching for her hand. Standing there, looking out to see his outstretched hands, she remembers watching those elevator doors close on day 1, thinking she was walking into a year-long nightmare. Now here she is, stupidly happy and almost feeling guilty about it. Like, is it okay to be this content? They bundle up for their walk, though Shihyun's too busy playing nature photographer with her eyes to actually button up properly. Jaewon has to step in with the whole mom-friend routine, fussing with her buttons before she catches a cold. But she's still in her own world, drinking in the changing seasons, until she decides to plant a surprise kiss on him. His confused face is priceless, but her casual, nobody's around is all the permission he needs to kiss her back properly. They're holding hands as they continue walking, both having the same weird realization. This park's been there the whole time, and they've never done this before. When Shihyun points out how they're doing all these first-time things post-divorce, Jaewon jumps at the opening. Where else does she want to go? Her first thought is an amusement park, but the weather's not playing nice, so she throws out the idea of an outdoor bar instead. Bad move. Jaewon's face does that thing it does whenever drinking comes up. She tries to salvage it with, "It's for the vibes," but no dice. Though finding out Mr. CEO has never been to one, it's exactly shocking. When he asks for other ideas, she mentions the beach. This man immediately goes full rich guy mode, offering up Hawaii like he's suggesting grabbing coffee. But Shihyun's keeping it real. East Sea is fine. Add some grilled clams and she's good to go. Jaewon, bless him, is ready to plan the whole thing. The perfect evening was her doing math out loud. 9 months left on their contract, counting the 2 months down and that bet she won, which Jaewon conveniently forgets about, earning himself a playful punch. She's trying to tell him how embarrassed she was that day, while he's just there, like, could have fooled me, until suddenly he drops this bomb. He doesn't want to think about the contract anymore. But wait, there's more. He hits her with the big question. Would she leave if the money wasn't a thing? Her mind zooms back to the elevator moment when everything felt like it was about to go from bad to worse. She could have grabbed the money and run. But now, that isn't even on her radar. She tells him she won't leave, hiding behind some excuse about the weight of the debt when really it's because she's stupidly in love with him. Then this man, who apparently took a masterclass in emotional bombshells, casually suggests they get married. Again. Like he's suggesting to have a dinner. He's going on about how it's just remarriage technically, But all he really wants is them together, while she's having a full-blown emotional short circuit. The tears start flowing and she's not even sure why at first. Then it hits her. Their hearts are in exactly the same place, and it's kind of beautiful and terrifying all at once. Later, during bath time, because apparently they're now a couple, he apologizes for the impromptu proposal. She assures him it's fine, she was just surprised. But yeah, she's going to need a minute to process this one. Jaewon, showing unprecedented patience, is totally cool with that. Morning finds Shihyun awake first, low-key creeping on sleeping Jaewon. He's always so serious when he's awake, but asleep? Total softie. Of course he catches her staring, because that's just her luck, and pulls her close with a sleepy 5 more minutes vibe. Her excuse about making breakfast gets shot down with his weekend laziness campaign. According to him, she's allowed to be lazy now. Between cuddles, he's already planning their next getaway, asking where she wants to go first. For once, she's got an answer ready. Meeting her mom. That gets his attention real quick. It's basically a yes to his proposal without actually saying it. Fast forward a few days and Shihyun's living her best life, napping in the afternoon because apparently that's what happiness does to you. Her mom calls with what sounds like good news. Jaewon's actually sending money home, acting like a proper son for once. The conversation shifts to Shihyun, but we'll never know what was said because time jumps into evening. She's out grocery shopping, mentally planning dinner and feeling pretty good about life. Jaewon seems to have gotten his act together, and yeah, maybe she's feeling a bit guilty about lying to her mom about the whole countryside job thing, but everything else is perfect. Until it's not. One shout of her name from behind and her perfect little bubble starts to crack. She turns around slow, like maybe if she takes enough time, it won't be who she thinks it is. But there's Jaewon, out of breath and wild-eyed, telling her she needs to come with him right now. When she refuses, he drops the bomb. Jaewon's got him working in some factory to pay off his debt. The same debt she thought she'd handled. Reality starts crashing in as pieces click into place. That weird night at the hotel, Jaewon's mysterious work calls, it all makes horrible sense now. While her mind is spinning, Jaewon gets louder, drawing attention they don't really need. The final straw comes when he tries playing the family card, asking if she values Jaewon over her own blood. Before it can spin further, a car screeches to a halt beside them. Jaewon appearing like some drama hero, except this isn't feeling very romantic anymore. When Jaewon's men move in, Jaewon panics, grabbing Shihyun as he bolts. Her attempt to break free goes wrong. Very wrong. Suddenly, she's on the pavement, and there's a taxi coming way too fast, and everything's happening in slow motion, except the taxi, which isn't slowing down at all. The world fades back into focus as Ji-yoon's eyes flutter open in a sterile hospital room. Before she can fully process where she is, Jaewon bursts through the doorway and rushes to her bedside. He grabs her hand, squeezing it gently as he tells her how worried sick he's been while she was unconscious. When he asks if she remembers what happened, fragments of memories flash through her mind. Her brother dragging her towards the road, the approaching car, then nothing but darkness. Jaewon reassures her that she got lucky. She hadn't actually been hit by the car, just passed out from the fall. A few scrapes were all she had to show for what could have been so much worse. "Where's Jaeyoon?" she asked softly. Jaewon explains that her brother's probably still in the waiting room, where he's been a mess, crying and apologizing non-stop. "He's not a bad kid," Jaewon adds with a sigh. "Just incredibly irresponsible. And that kind of recklessness? It's dangerous." Shihyun can't help but smile at his assessment. Despite Jaewon's protest, she's pushed herself into a sitting position. "I just want to talk," she tells him, then drops the bomb. "Jaewon told me everything." She turns away, unable to meet his eyes. "You're still as selfish as ever. How long were you planning to keep me in the dark?" Jaewon shifts uncomfortably. "Just until things improved." "And if they never did?" After a long pause, he admits he would have taken the secret to his grave. "Jaewon doesn't care about you," he explains. "He needed to learn." Shihyun's voice got quiet. She understands him, but everything that has happened now serves as an eye-opener. She takes a deep breath. "I can't marry you again, Jaewon." The confidence drained from Jaewon's face, replaced by an unfamiliar vulnerability as he questioned her decision to end their engagement. Shihyun's response came tinged with hurt and embarrassment. She couldn't bear the thought of future scenarios where he'd shoulder burdens alone, keeping her in the shadows. Her voice trembled as she pressed him about their past marriage, the period leading up to her father's death, and their divorce. The pain of being kept in the dark now made her question everything, including how he truly saw her. Before she could finish expressing her doubts, Jaewon's arms enveloped her in a sudden embrace. Despite her weak protests, he held on, finally revealing the truth that had been buried beneath his actions. He'd done everything out of deep affection for her, driven by the desire to ensure her happiness in this second chance at marriage. Unlike their first marriage, where she'd been obligated to marry someone she didn't love, he wanted to shield her from any worries this time around. His confession continued, admitting how he had underestimated how much the situation with her brother would affect her. When he revealed that his awkwardness during the first date stemmed from intense attraction rather than disgust, Shihyun's world tilted on its axis. All this time, she'd misread his actions completely. Now, faced with the choice to stay or leave, confusion clouded her thoughts. But Jaewon wasn't finished with his revelations. Just as she grappled with this new understanding, he dropped another bombshell. Letting her go wasn't an option anymore, not when she's carrying his child. The news hit her like a gentle thunderclap. She was 8 weeks pregnant, adding yet another layer to their already complex situation. Months fly by and the baby finally arrives. One evening, a mysterious package arrived at their doorstep. Inside, nestled among the wrapping, lay a pair of tiny baby shoes that instantly brought joy to Shihyun's face. Jaewon's initial caution melted away when they discovered the thoughtful gift was from Jaewon. Life had taken unexpected turns since the accident. Jaewon had made remarkable strides in turning his life around, sending money to their mother regularly and steadily repaying his debt to Jaewon. Though Shihyun suspected Jaewon's watchful eye played a part in her brother's transformation, she couldn't help but feel proud. Looking at miniature shoes, she mused about how long it would be before their little one could wear them. The moment shifted when Jaewon called her over for some fruit, presenting her with perfectly sliced apple pieces. As she savored them, complimenting both on their sweetness and his improved cutting skills, that familiar playful smile crept across her face. Jaewon knew that smile all too well, and soon they found themselves lost in each other until their baby's cries brought them back to reality. They rushed to comfort their son, a perfect miniature of Jaewon himself. By the time Jaewon arrived with warm milk, Shihyun had already soothed their little one back to sleep. Despite her insistence that she was fine, Jaewon persisted in wanting to hold their son, concerned about her tired arms. Watching him cradle their baby, Shihyun's heart swelled with contentment, knowing she'd made the right choice for her happiness. When Jaewon caught her smiling, he misread it as amusement at his awkward holding of their son. But Shihyun explained how their baby looked even tinier and more precious in his father's arms. Though their animated conversation stirred the baby once again, Shihyun quickly restored peace. As she watched her little family, she realized this was just the beginning of their journey together, one filled with the promise of countless moments to grow closer and deeper in love. And with that, this beautiful story comes to an end. Enjoyed it? Please like, share, and subscribe for more. Until next time, ciao ciao!